12 men volunteered to eat poison every day for 5 years. The government paid them. The press called them heroes. And when evidence mounted that the chemicals were deadly, the food industry stood in court and said, "Show us the law we're breaking." No one could answer, because there was no law. America, 1900. 45 million people, and nobody knew what they were eating. Canned meat filled with borax, ketchup preserved with salicylic acid, milk treated with formaldehyde. Manufacturers added chemicals to make food last longer, look fresher, taste better. And nobody tested whether those chemicals were safe, because there was no requirement to test, no regulations, no oversight. If it made food cheaper and lasted longer, you could add it. The market would sort it out. Except the market was killing people, and nobody could prove it. Because poison is hard to see when it accumulates slowly, when everyone's consuming it, when the symptoms look like normal illness. How do you prove something's dangerous when the entire country's been eating it for decades? Someone had to find out. And a government chemist decided the only way to get proof was controlled human testing. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, 1902. The chief chemist had spent 15 years documenting food adulteration, testing samples, publishing reports. The industry ignored him. Politicians dismissed him. The public didn't care. Because laboratory data wasn't enough, industry lawyers would stand up and say, "Show us the victims. Where are the bodies?" The chemist couldn't point to them. Because chronic poisoning doesn't leave obvious victims. It weakens. It sickens. It kills slowly over decades. So a decision was made that would shock the country. Recruit volunteers. Feed them the chemicals in question, under controlled conditions, with medical documentation. Prove, scientifically, that these food additives were poison. The experiment would be called the Hygienic Table Trials, but the press had a better name, the Poison Squad. Washington, D.C., 1902. A notice was posted at the Department of Agriculture. Volunteers wanted for scientific study of food preservatives. Must be healthy males aged 18 to 30. Will receive all meals free. Small payment provided. 12 men were needed. Young, healthy, willing to consume chemical additives under observation. Applications flooded in. Young government clerks, office workers, men making $10 a week who saw free meals as a bonus. And most had no idea what they were volunteering for until the interview. You'll eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner in our facility. Every meal will contain measured doses of chemical preservatives currently used in American food. We'll monitor your health, document every symptom. The experiment will last months, possibly years. What chemicals? Borax, salicylic acid, sulfurous acid, formaldehyde, benzoic acid. Are they dangerous? That's what we're trying to find out. Half the applicants walked away. The other half signed up anyway. Some needed the money. Some believed in the science. Some wanted adventure. None of them understood what they were agreeing to. By December 1902, 12 young men sat down to their first meal in the Poison Squad dining room. The room looked normal. White tablecloths, fine china, and professional waiters, except for one detail. On each plate sat a small glass capsule filled with white powder. Borax, the same chemical used to clean floors, now in their food. The first volunteer picked up his capsule, hesitated. How much are we taking? Half a gram to start. We'll increase the dose weekly until symptoms appear. And if we get sick? We document it. That's the point. The 12 men swallowed their capsules, ate their meals, went back to their regular jobs. For the first week, nothing happened. Week 2, the doses increased. 1 gram of borax per meal. A few men reported headaches. Mild nausea, nothing serious. Week 3, 2 grams per meal. Now the symptoms were obvious. Violent stomach pain, vomiting that wouldn't stop. Some men couldn't keep food down at all, and the medical team documented everything. Pulse rates, weight loss, urine samples showing kidney stress. But the experiment continued because the food industry was watching and their lawyers were ready. These symptoms prove nothing. Maybe these men are unusually sensitive. Maybe they have underlying conditions. This doesn't prove borax is unsafe for the general population. So the experiment expanded. After 6 months of borax testing, the squad moved to the next chemical, salicylic acid, used in ketchup, canned vegetables, anything that needed preserving. The volunteers knew what was coming now. They'd lived through borax. This would be worse. Within days, men were collapsing. Kidney pain so severe they couldn't walk. Bleeding from the stomach. One volunteer was hospitalized. The press started publishing updates. Knows Poison Squad member number 4 seriously ill. Public interest exploded. People realized these men were eating the same chemicals in their own food, just in higher, concentrated doses. If controlled amounts made healthy young men violently ill, what was it doing to children? The elderly? People consuming these chemicals in small amounts over decades. But the food industry fought back. They published editorials. The experiment is flawed. These doses are unrealistic. No one eats this much salicylic acid. They hired scientists to testify. The chemicals are safe in normal food quantities. They attacked the experiment's methodology. This proves nothing about real-world consumption. And legally, they were protected, because there was no law requiring food manufacturers to prove their additives were safe before use. The legal framework was, if you can sell it, it's permitted. The burden of proof fell on the government to prove harm, not on manufacturers to prove safety. And proof required victims, documented illness, clear causation. The Poison Squad was creating that proof, one sick volunteer at a time. 1904, 2 years into the experiment, the volunteers had consumed borax, salicylic acid, sulfurous acid. Now came formaldehyde, the same chemical used to preserve dead bodies. Found in milk, added to keep it from spoiling in summer heat. The squad members knew what formaldehyde was. They knew what it did to tissue. Some refused. The experiment was voluntary. They could leave any time. 3 men quit. 9 stayed. They consumed formaldehyde with every meal for weeks. The results were catastrophic. Severe vomiting. The chemical burns in the throat and stomach. Liver damage showing in blood tests. 2 more men were hospitalized. The medical documentation was overwhelming. But the dairy industry's response was immediate. The amounts used in milk are far smaller than the experimental doses. This proves nothing about normal consumption. They published advertisements. Formaldehyde preserved milk is safe. Don't believe the hysteria. They lobbied politicians. These regulations will destroy the dairy industry. Milk will spoil. Prices will skyrocket. Working families will suffer. And the argument worked. For years, it won. Because the question wasn't, is formaldehyde safe? The question became, what is the role of government? Industry defenders argued, government has no right to tell businesses what they can add to food, and the market will correct itself. Consumers will choose safe products. Reformers argued, the market has failed. People are getting sick. Government must protect public health. Both sides claimed to represent working families. The debate raged while the experiment continued. By 1906, the Poison Squad had been testing chemicals for 5 years. The medical evidence was undeniable. Every chemical tested had produced documented illness, kidney damage, liver damage, digestive destruction. One volunteer had permanent health problems. But the experiment had achieved its purpose. It created proof, scientific, medical, documented. Proof that chemicals in American food were poisoning the population slowly. The press published the findings. Public outrage built, reform movements organized. And after years of political battles, something finally happened. Congress passed the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, the first federal law requiring food safety standards. The law banned certain additives, required ingredient labeling, created government inspection authority. It wasn't perfect. Enforcement was weak. Penalties were small. Loopholes existed. But it established a principle that would transform American food. For the first time in history, the law stated, you cannot add whatever you want to food and sell it to people. You must prove it's safe first. And the Poison Squad sacrifice made it possible. 12 men who volunteered to get sick so millions wouldn't. But here's what most people don't know. The victory in 1906 wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because passing a law and enforcing it are very different things. The 1906 Act had minimal funding, few inspectors, limited authority. Food companies adapted. They reformulated. They found new chemicals. They lobbied for exemptions. It took decades of additional fights. More scandals, more deaths, more public outrage, stronger laws in 1938, additional reforms in 1958, updates in 1990. Each regulation was written in response to documented harm. Each protection emerged from failure. The system we have today was built on the dead, one tragedy at a time. And those protections are only as strong as our commitment to maintaining them. Today, food additives must be tested before use. Generally recognized as safe standards exist. The FDA has authority to ban dangerous substances. The system that required human volunteers to prove poison was poison is gone. We won. The food in your kitchen is safer than it's ever been. But the most dangerous part of this story isn't in the past. Those protections only exist because of enforcement. The laws are on the books, but enforcement is a choice, made every year in budget negotiations. When budgets get cut, testing decreases, monitoring weakens, approvals speed up. Not because laws disappeared, but because laws without enforcement are just words. And every year, people argue food safety regulation is too expensive, too burdensome. The same arguments the borax manufacturers made in 1902. The chemical companies operated for decades, adding untested substances to food. Everyone knew. It continued anyway, because profit mattered more than public health. It took human volunteers getting poisoned under medical supervision, press coverage, and public outrage, years of political battles, to prove the free market wouldn't fix itself. Every food safety regulation we have was written in response to documented harm. Every testing protocol emerged from failure. Every enforcement mechanism was built on tragedy. The protections didn't come from foresight. They came from the sick and the dead. And those protections are only as strong as our commitment to maintaining them. You trust the food in your refrigerator. You trust someone tested the additives, verified the safety. That trust depends on a system, and systems require maintenance. How much testing would need to be skipped before dangerous chemicals reach market? How much enforcement would need to decline before the protections built on the Poison Squad sacrifice stop working? The Poison Squad experiments ended in 1907, but the logic that enabled them, profit over safety, business freedom over public health, burden of proof on victims not manufacturers, never disappeared. It's still here, still waiting for enforcement to weaken, waiting for budgets to be cut, waiting for people to forget why the protections exist. And when that happens, when enforcement erodes quietly enough that nobody notices, the next disaster won't look like the last one. And when it happens, the excuse will sound familiar.